Ethan Cole had lived most of his adult life on open land, under wide skies, with nothing but the sound of horses, wind, and his own thoughts to keep him company. People in town knew him as the quiet cowboy who didn't talk much, didn't stay in one place too long, and never looked for attention. He preferred silence. Silence didn't judge. Silence didn't hurt. Silence didn't burn down your dreams like the wildfire that took his family ranch 2 years earlier. Most days, Ethan rode into town early in the morning to buy supplies or check on small jobs folks needed done. He didn't mind hard work. It kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. But even with his calm nature, the weight of loneliness often sat heavy on him. There were moments when he wanted someone to talk to, someone who could understand the loss he carried, but he never said it out loud. He didn't know how. One late afternoon, the sun sinking low behind the dusty hills, Ethan was riding back from the market. His saddlebag held just a few simple things: bread, dried fruit, a tin of coffee. As he passed the narrow street near the old church, he heard something fall and scatter across the ground. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make his horse lift its head. Ethan slowed down and turned. An older woman, maybe in her late 60s, stood on the sidewalk with her grocery bags torn open. Apples rolled near the curb. A jar of jam lay unbroken, but dusty by her feet, and she stood there frozen, looking not just tired, but overwhelmed, like this small accident was the last thing she had strength for. He climbed off his horse without a second thought. "Ma'am, you all right?" he asked gently. The woman looked up at him with soft, tired eyes. "I'm fine. I just lost my grip," she said, though her voice carried more sadness than annoyance. Ethan knelt down and began picking up the apples one by one. The woman tried to help, but her hands shook slightly. He noticed how light the groceries were, just bread, some fruit, a few cans. It wasn't the weight that broke the bag. It was time. The handles were worn, just like the woman who carried them. "We can put these in my saddlebag," Ethan said. "It'll hold up better." "Oh, I couldn't ask you," she began. "You're not asking," he interrupted kindly. "I'm offering." She looked at him for a moment, surprised by the softness in his tone, then slowly nodded. Together, they gathered what had fallen, and Ethan secured everything neatly. He lifted the last apple and handed it to her. She held it carefully, as though it were something precious. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I haven't had someone help me in a long time." He gave her a small nod. "Where do you live? I can walk you there." "It's not far," she said. "Just down that road." "Name's Marla." "Marla Dawson." "Ethan," he replied. They walked side by side at a slow pace. Marla moved carefully, and Ethan matched her steps without making it obvious he was doing so. She seemed the kind of woman who used to walk with confidence. But time, loneliness, and the silence in her home had worn down her strength. After a minute, she let out a breath she'd been holding. "You know," she said softly, "I'm starving for this." Ethan looked at her, waiting for her to finish. "For someone noticing," she said. "For someone stopping to help without me feeling like a burden." Her words were fragile, almost whispering, but they held a lifetime of bottled emotions. Ethan slowed his steps even more, giving her the space to speak if she wanted. The street was quiet, the evening breeze gentle. "Well," he said simply, "everyone needs a little kindness. And yet," she murmured, "not everyone gets it." Ethan didn't know what to say. He understood loneliness deeply, though he rarely admitted it. The silence after losing his ranch didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. Marla continued. "My husband used to walk this road with me. He passed away 10 years ago. But some days, it still feels like yesterday." She gave a small laugh, not of amusement, but of resignation. "People think you get used to being alone. But you don't. You just get better at hiding it." Ethan walked quietly beside her, feeling her words settle heavily in his heart. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a connection to this woman he had only just met. Perhaps it was because he, too, walked through life with memories that wouldn't leave him alone. As they reached her house, a small, old-fashioned home with chipped paint and a sagging porch, Ethan helped set the groceries inside. The door creaked softly, as if even the house missed being opened more often. "You live alone?" Ethan asked gently. She nodded. "My children moved to different cities. They send letters sometimes. Life is busy for them." She smiled faintly. "I don't blame them. But the silence gets heavy." Ethan understood that feeling more than he wished. Marla placed her hand on the counter and looked at him with a grateful expression. "I really appreciate you helping me. You don't know how much this meant." He nodded. "Anytime." Before he turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice softer than ever. "You remind me of my husband," she said. "He wasn't much of a talker either. But he had a good heart." Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, he just gave a small, respectful smile. As he stepped onto the porch, she said one more thing. "If you ever pass by again, don't hesitate to knock. Even just a hello would mean a lot." He nodded politely, mounted his horse, and gave her a gentle wave. She stood at the doorway, waving back with that same soft smile. But as he rode away slowly, he glanced back once and saw her still at the door, not moving, not closing it, just watching him ride off as if the moment could prolong her feeling of not being alone. The sky turned deeper shades of orange as he headed down the dusty road. Ethan felt that, for the first time in a long while, his day had given him more than just chores and routines. Helping her had stirred something in him, a small reminder that connection, even with strangers, could ease the weight of silence. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew he would pass by her house again. Maybe tomorrow, or the day after. Not out of obligation, but because something about her gentle eyes and quiet strength made him feel less alone in his own struggles. And perhaps, he thought, she felt the same. Ethan did not plan on visiting Marla again so soon, but the next morning, as he rode past her road, something pulled him to slow down. Maybe it was her gentle smile from the day before. Maybe it was the memory of how she stood alone in her doorway, watching him leave with quiet hope in her eyes. Or maybe it was simply the fact that he had not talked to anyone kindly in a long time. Either way, he found his horse turning toward her house almost on its own. When he reached her gate, he noticed her sitting on the porch with a cup of tea in her hand. She looked surprised when she saw him, surprised in a happy, warm way. Like someone who had been waiting but didn't want to admit it. "Oh," she said with a small smile. "I didn't think I'd see you this soon." Ethan climbed off his horse. "I was riding by," he said simply, "and thought I'd check if everything's all right." "That's very thoughtful," she replied. She moved her teacup aside and stood up slowly. "Would you like something to drink?" "Tea, water. I even have lemonade, though it might be a bit too sweet." Ethan shook his head lightly. "I'm fine. Just wanted to see if you needed help with anything." Marla paused, then laughed gently. "Well, if you're offering, there are a few things around the house that have been waiting for strong hands." She led him around to the side of the house where an old fence leaned dangerously to one side. A few boards had broken, and the nails were rusted. Ethan studied it for a moment, then rolled up his sleeves. "This shouldn't take long," he said. Marla watched him work while standing a safe distance away. She didn't want to get in his way, so she folded her hands in front of her and simply looked grateful. "You know," she said after a moment, "I used to have my husband fix everything around here. He liked staying busy. It made him feel needed." I had a moment to standing the scribe. Ethan hammered a nail into place and replied without looking up. "Everyone likes to feel needed." "Ethan." "Do you?" she asked softly. Ethan paused. He wasn't used to answering personal questions. Most people in town didn't ask them. They just accepted that he was quiet and private. But something about Marla made him feel like he didn't need to close himself up so tightly. "I guess," he said slowly. "I don't think about it much. But it feels good to help." Marla smiled behind him. "Then maybe you're helping both of us." He didn't answer, but the truth was, her words stayed with him. By the time the fence was fixed, an hour had passed. And Marla had brought him a glass of lemonade anyway, insisting gently. Ethan thanked her and accepted it. It was indeed too sweet. But he didn't mind. It felt like part of the house, warm, old-fashioned, made with care. When he finished the drink, Marla walked him back to his horse. "You've done more than enough," she said. But she looked like she wanted to say more, something about how his presence made her day brighter. He tipped his hat politely. "If something else needs fixing, you can let me know." Her eyes brightened. "Well, there is a porch step that creaks, and a loose drawer in the kitchen, and some boxes in the attic I've been meaning to sort through." She paused, then added, slightly embarrassed, "I suppose I've been waiting for an excuse to ask someone." Ethan looked at her kindly. "Just leave the porch light on if you need help. I'll see it when I pass by." For the next few days, that's exactly what happened. Each evening, her porch light glowed warmly, even before sunset, almost as if she couldn't wait. And every time Ethan saw it, he stopped. He didn't feel pressured. In fact, he felt welcomed in a way he hadn't felt in years. He helped her sweep the porch one day. Another day, he tightened the hinges on her back door that had been squeaking for months. On the third day, he brought her a basket of eggs from a neighbor who had more hens than she could handle. Marla smiled brightly at the gift, holding the eggs with both hands like they were something rare. "You're spoiling me," she teased. "Just helping," he replied. Often, Marla didn't really need help. Sometimes she would ask him to reach a jar on the top shelf or carry a small box that she could have carried herself. At first, Ethan didn't understand why she kept requesting such small tasks. But then he realized she wasn't asking because of the task, she was asking because she wanted him to stay a little longer. And strangely, he didn't mind staying. One afternoon, after he fixed a drawer that had been sticking, Marla sat down at her kitchen table and sighed softly. "You know, this house used to be full of noise. My husband humming while he worked, my children running through the halls." She touched the table gently. "Now it's just me and the clock on the wall." Ethan stood quietly, not wanting to interrupt her thoughts. Then Marla looked up at him. "When you're here, the house feels alive again. I hope you don't think I'm asking too much." "You're not," Ethan said, and he meant it. He began to notice things he had overlooked before, the way her wrinkles deepened when she smiled, the way her hands trembled slightly when she carried dishes, the way her voice softened when she shared memories. She wasn't just lonely, she was someone who had loved deeply, lived fully, and lost so much that silence had become a burden rather than a comfort. The more he visited her, the more Ethan realized that helping her was helping him too. Her stories made him feel less alone. Her gentle laughter filled the spaces in his mind where sadness used to live. One evening, as he was fixing a loose shutter outside her house, Marla stepped onto the porch with 2 cups of hot tea. She handed one to him and held the other between her hands to warm them. "You must think I'm silly," she said. "Always finding something for you to fix." Ethan sipped the tea. "Not silly at all." She looked out at the darkening sky and said quietly, "When you've been alone long enough, even the smallest conversation can feel like sunlight." Ethan didn't speak right away. His mind drifted to the nights he spent alone near the old burnt ranch land, staring at the empty dark and trying not to drown in memories. He understood her words too well. "You bring sunlight here too," he said honestly. Marla's eyes softened as she looked at him. As the days passed, Ethan became a familiar presence not just to Marla but to the neighbors as well. When people saw him walking up her porch steps or carrying tools into her house, they whispered to each other, not critically, but curiously. "That cowboy seems to have taken a liking to helping the widow," some said. "Good for her. She's been lonely for years," others added. But Ethan didn't pay attention to any of that. His concern was simply that Marla seemed happier. And so did he. One afternoon, while sorting a few dusty boxes in her attic, Marla paused and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You're a good man, Ethan," she said softly. "You don't talk much, but your actions say everything." Ethan grabbed a box and said shyly, "Just doing what anyone would." "No," she replied gently. "Not everyone would." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he kept working. But he couldn't stop thinking about her words. By the end of the second week, helping Marla had become part of his routine. What started as simple acts of kindness turned into something deeper, something meaningful. Every time he fixed something or brought her fresh groceries, she looked at him as if he had given her a piece of her life back. And every time she thanked him, he felt something warm he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. One evening, as he prepared to leave, she touched his arm lightly and said, "I hope you'll keep coming by. Even if there's nothing to fix. Sometimes, I just enjoy the company." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'll come." And he meant it. Not out of duty, but out of a growing connection he didn't fully understand yet. A connection that filled the empty spaces inside both of them. Days that followed carried a quiet rhythm, almost like a gentle song, that both Ethan and Marla had begun to hum without realizing it. Ethan would ride into town for supplies or small jobs, and on his way back, he always slowed down when he reached her road. Sometimes the porch light was on. Sometimes she was already waiting by the window. Sometimes she pretended she wasn't waiting at all, acting surprised when she saw him. But Ethan could easily tell. There was a softness in her eyes every time he arrived, a small lift in her shoulders, as if a heavy load had been set down. One morning, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the sky had a soft gold glow, and the air felt cooler. Marla was sweeping her porch, moving slowly, the broom bristles making a light scratching sound on the wooden boards. When she noticed him, she gave a warm smile that reached her eyes. "You're up early today," she called out. "Couldn't sleep," he answered honestly. She leaned the broom against the wall. "I know that feeling. Some mornings I wake up before the birds and just sit here because the silence feels too big." Ethan understood. He had spent many early mornings sitting alone by the remains of his family ranch, listening to nothing but the wind and remembering everything he wished he could forget. He stepped onto the porch. "Anything need doing today?" She shook her head gently. "Actually, I was hoping you'd sit for a moment. The air feels nicer when someone else is breathing it too." He sat on the porch step, and she sat a few feet away in her rocking chair. The morning was peaceful. The leaves rustled softly. A few birds hopped near the fence. Neither of them spoke for a while. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It felt shared. After a few minutes, Marla looked at him thoughtfully. "You carry something," she said in a soft voice. "Something heavy. I can see it in your eyes." Ethan didn't respond right away. He stared down at the wooden boards beneath his boots. "I lost my ranch," he finally said. "A wildfire took it. And everything on it." Marla's rocking slowed. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. It was my father's before it was mine." He continued quietly. "Spent my whole life there. After the fire, I tried to stay in the area, but the land didn't feel the same. Felt like the ghosts of what used to be were everywhere." Marla nodded with deep understanding. "Losing a home is like losing a part of yourself. It's lonely out there now," Ethan admitted. Marla folded her hands in her lap. "Lonely feels different when you've known what it's like to have someone beside you." He glanced at her. "You miss him a lot, don't you?" "Every day," she said, her voice calm but full of memories. "But it's not the kind of sadness that makes you cry all the time. It's the kind that sits beside you quietly. You learn to live with it, but you never stop feeling it." Ethan looked out at the horizon. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." "I think so," she said with a gentle smile. After that morning, a deeper kind of comfort settled between them, one that didn't require many words. Sometimes Marla talked while Ethan worked. Other times Ethan spoke while she listened patiently. Sometimes neither said anything and still felt like the moment was enough. The townspeople began to notice Ethan's regular visits. Some waved at him as he passed. Others nodded approvingly. They all knew Marla had lived alone for years, and they could see how her smile had become brighter lately. One afternoon, Ethan found Marla sitting at her kitchen table with old photo albums spread out in front of her. She looked up quickly, almost embarrassed. "Oh, I didn't expect you so soon," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Want me to come back later?" Ethan asked. "No," she said quickly. "Stay. I was just remembering things." He walked closer. The album pages were filled with pictures: her wedding day, her children when they were young, family holidays, her late husband smiling proudly beside her. "These are good memories," Ethan said gently. "They are," she agreed, tracing a finger over one photo. "But memories can only warm a room for so long. Sometimes you want someone real to share the day with." Ethan sat across from her. They spent nearly an hour flipping through the pages. Marla told stories about her husband, how he used to whistle while fixing the roof, how he planted flowers every spring, how he loved making her laugh with silly jokes. Ethan listened quietly. Her stories felt like small lanterns lighting up the shadows in his mind. At one point, she closed the album and looked him in the eyes. "You know, I used to pray for someone to talk to. I didn't expect an answer this late in life." Ethan shifted slightly. "I didn't expect to find a place that felt peaceful again." Their eyes met for a brief moment, carrying unspoken understanding. As the weeks passed, Ethan's visits grew longer. He helped her mend a curtain, repair a loose shingle on the roof, and organize the boxes in her attic. But more than the work, it was their time together that mattered. One evening, they sat in her backyard, as the sky turned shades of pink and purple. Marla had planted flowers years ago, and though many had wilted, some still bloomed. Ethan noticed the way she looked at them, like they were pieces of her past still holding on. "When my husband was alive, we used to sit out here every evening," she said softly. "Some days we talked for hours. Other days we just listened to the crickets." Ethan looked around. "It's peaceful here." "It's peaceful again," she corrected gently. "Because you're here." Those words settled inside him like warm sunlight. He hadn't felt important to anyone in a long time. As dusk settled, Marla brought out a small lantern and placed it between them. Its soft glow made the moment feel even more meaningful. "You know," she said after a while, "when you first helped me with the groceries, I thought it was just a small kindness from a stranger. I never imagined you'd keep coming back." Ethan leaned back slightly. She chuckled softly. "Sometimes life gives you the company you need without asking." Ethan smiled, one of the rare, genuine smiles that didn't feel practiced or forced. "Maybe we both needed it." They fell into a comfortable silence again as night fully settled in. The crickets began singing. The breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. The lantern flickered softly between them. Marla finally spoke, her voice gentle and sincere. "Ethan, I hope you know you're not just helping me with chores. When you come, the house feels alive again. I feel alive again." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, he understood just how much these visits meant to her. But what he didn't say, what he wasn't sure how to say, was that her presence had begun to fill the empty spaces in his own heart too. When he stood up to leave that night, Marla walked him to the porch. She paused before he mounted his horse and said softly, "Please keep coming. Even if it's just for a few minutes." Ethan placed one hand on the saddle and looked at her with quiet honesty. "I will." She nodded slowly, her eyes warm. "Good. Because some days, that's all I need." As he rode away, he glanced back and saw her still standing there, watching him with a peaceful expression. And he knew he wasn't just helping her, he was healing too. Their stories, once separate and lonely, were slowly weaving together into something neither of them expected. A quiet companionship built on kindness, patience, shared memories, and the simple comfort of not being alone anymore. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's visits to Marla's house became a gentle part of both their lives. Like the steady ticking of a clock or the rising of the morning sun, what started as small acts of kindness had grown into something deeper, an unspoken friendship, a quiet bond that brought comfort to both their hearts. Ethan didn't admit it out loud, but he looked forward to the moments he spent at Marla's home. It felt like a place where the silence wasn't empty, where memories didn't hurt as much, and where he wasn't just a lonely cowboy wandering through life. One warm afternoon, Ethan arrived to see Marla sitting on her porch with a notebook in her lap. Her eyes lifted, brightening as soon as she saw him. "There you are," she said cheerfully. "I thought you might not come today." "Why wouldn't I?" Ethan asked, tying his horse to the fence. "Well," she said with a smile, Sometimes people get busy, or sometimes they worry they're visiting too much. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Was that a message for me? Maybe, she teased. I've been told I'm not very subtle. He chuckled softly and walked up the steps. You don't need to worry. If I didn't want to be here, I wouldn't be. Marla's smile softened. Good. Because I enjoy your company more than I can say. He sat in the chair beside her, and for a moment, they simply enjoyed the warm breeze. A few leaves danced across the yard, and the faint smell of fresh bread drifted from a neighboring house. What's in the notebook? Ethan asked. Marla closed it gently. Just thoughts. Things I want to remember. Things I want to do. She hesitated, then added, I made a list. A list? He asked. Yes, she said. Of things I want to experience again before I'm too old. Nothing big, just little things. Ethan leaned forward. Like what? She smiled shyly, almost like a child sharing a secret. Like planting new flowers. Taking a walk further down the road. Fixing up the old bench in the backyard. Eating fresh berries from the market. Visiting the pond near the woods. Ethan listened carefully, sensing the meaning behind her words. These weren't just small tasks. These were pieces of life she missed, moments she wanted to feel again. So, she said softly, I was hoping maybe you'd help me do some of them. Then sighed. The lied forling to do some. The lied forling and reselve. The lied forling to do some. The lied forling. The lied forling. Ethan didn't hesitate. I'd be glad to. Her face lit up with gentle excitement. Really? Really, he said simply. The next day, the two of them started with something small. Marla had always loved flowers, but her garden had grown dull from years of neglect. Together, they planted new seeds, daisies, marigolds, lavender. Marla knelt slowly beside him, her knees stiff, but her hands steady as she patted the soil. I haven't done this in years, she said softly. You haven't lost your touch, Ethan replied. I missed this, she whispered, almost to herself. I missed feeling like I was part of something growing. The days passed in a gentle rhythm. One afternoon they painted the old backyard bench, turning the faded wood into a fresh, calming blue. Another day they walked slowly down the long, dusty road that led to the fields. Marla moved carefully, leaning slightly on his arm when the ground dipped. You don't have to hold me, she said once, embarrassed. I know, he replied, but I want to make sure you're steady. She gave him a grateful look that said more than any words could. Sometimes they sat in the kitchen drinking tea. Sometimes on the porch watching the sky change colors. Sometimes in the living room going through old letters and memories. Ethan found himself talking more than he ever had before about his father, the ranch he lost, the dreams he buried under the ashes. Marla listened with warmth and understanding, never judging, never interrupting. You know, she said one evening as they watched the sunset, you're helping me remember how to live again. Ethan looked at her quietly. You're helping me too. Marla blinked, touched by his honesty. I didn't know I could help anyone anymore. You help just by being here, Ethan said softly. By talking. By listening. By caring. She looked down at her hands, humbled. I spent years thinking my days were just passing by. Empty and slow. But now, Ethan encouraged. Now I look forward to something, she finished, her voice warm. Their small world became a healing space, one where grief softened, loneliness faded, and everyday moments turned meaningful. But one afternoon, when Ethan arrived, he found Marla pacing nervously on her porch. Her forehead creased with worry. What's wrong? He asked immediately. She wrung her hands. You weren't here yesterday. I had to help with a job on the other side of town, he explained. It took longer than I expected. Her shoulders relaxed with relief. I thought, maybe you didn't want to come anymore. Ethan stepped closer. Marla, I wouldn't stop coming without telling you. Quote. She let out a shaky breath and gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I guess I got scared. I've lost so many people in my life. Sometimes I worry when someone doesn't show up. Ethan's expression softened. You don't have to worry. I'm not leaving. Her eyes filled with gratitude. Good. Because I'm starving for more days like the ones we've had. More mornings with conversation. More evenings sitting outside. More reasons to smile. I hope that's not too much to ask. It's not, Ethan said gently. I want that too. After that conversation, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself to be there. Not out of obligation, but because he truly wanted to be, and because Marla deserved moments filled with hope, not fear of being left behind. One bright morning, Ethan surprised her with a small basket of wildflowers he picked near the river. When he handed them to her, Marla held the bouquet against her chest. Oh, Ethan, she whispered. They're beautiful. They reminded me of you, he said simply. She looked at him with eyes full of warmth. Not romantic affection, just deep, sincere gratitude. A connection between two lonely souls who had found comfort in each other's company. Later that week, Ethan started working on a new project, a small corner of his old burnt ranch that he had rarely visited. It was a piece of land with rich soil that survived the fire. But he had never touched it again. He cleared the weeds, leveled the ground, and planted flowers, bright ones, soft ones, and some of the very seeds he and Marla had planted in her garden. When he finished, he brought Marla to see it. She stepped onto the land slowly, her eyes wide. The flowers stood tall in the sunlight, swaying gently in the breeze. Oh my, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You did all this? For you, Ethan said quietly. I wanted you to have a place that feels peaceful. A place that grows, just like you helped me grow again. Marla touched one of the flowers gently, her hand shaking not from weakness but from feeling overwhelmed. This is the more I was asking for, she said thickly. Not more help, not more things done around the house, but more life, more moments that feel full. Ethan stood beside her. Then I hope this gives you that. She turned to him, eyes soft with appreciation. It already has. They stood there for a long time, watching the flowers sway. The sun warmed their skin, the wind carried the scent of fresh soil. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. Their connection remained simple: kindness, companionship, shared stories, and gentle moments. No grand promises, no complicated expectations, just two people who brought light back into each other's lives. From that day on, whenever Marla felt lonely, she visited the flower patch. And whenever Ethan felt lost, he found comfort in her words, her stories, and the calm presence she brought to his world. Together, without planning it, they had discovered something rare and beautiful. The healing power of being there for someone, even in the simplest of ways. And so, their story continued quiet, steady, and full of new life, proving that sometimes the heart doesn't need much to feel whole again. All it needs is kindness, and someone willing to stay.